Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 18th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Glenn Youngkin, the Republican nominee for governor, caught on a hot mic talking about his anti-abortion stance with voters, or rather, actually, the lack thereof in terms of the transparency from his campaign as to where Youngkin stands on the issue of abortion. Now, we all know that Roe v. Wade has decided this question of abortion for quite some time now, but we've seen constant reports, especially recently, of governors across red states and sometimes blue states putting forth efforts in order to restrict abortion access for women around the country. Glenn Youngkin hasn't taken a stance as the official Republican nominee, though did take a stance during the time in which he was running for that GOP nomination. When he made that position back in earlier this year, he had told Republican voters that he was completely pro-life, anti-abortion to the fullest extent. Then, after he became the Republican nominee, he dropped it from his campaign rhetoric, and this tape, which I'm not going to show you but rather read to you, shows exactly why he did it. Now, in this statement, he's caught on video talking about how he cannot share his issue of abortion. But this was his exact quote to someone he thought was close to the campaign and close enough that he could reveal such a very, in a sense, deceiving form of information. Now, not to say that politicians don't hide issues from the voters. That's not what this is meant to be highlighting, that this was some type of major revelation that politicians around this country lie to their voters. That happens on both sides. But the point being, with abortion being an issue that has been mentioned for decades now, it seems to be evident to the voters in Virginia that this is an issue that matters closely to the nominee, Glenn Youngkin. That this is something where he now has an honest stance about, but just simply can't share it out of fear of losing the independent portion of the electorate, saying, quote, "I'm going to be really honest with you. The short answer is in this campaign, I can't," end quote, referring to the fact that he cannot share his issue of abortion. Then, continue the quoting, "When I'm governor and I have a majority in the House," we'll talk about that in a moment, "we can start going on offense. But as a campaign topic, sadly, that in fact won't win my independent votes that I have to get." Now, first things first, the reason why he said, "when I have the majority in the House," because the last time that Republicans had a majority in the House of Delegates was in 2015. 2017, Democrats went from being in the super minority up to about even, and then 2019, they reclaimed the majority. So currently speaking, Democrats have a trifecta in the state of Virginia, and it sort of is in tune with the fact that Joe Biden had the largest margin of victory for a Democrat in Virginia since 1944. I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you've heard that a lot, because that's a major important thing about where Virginia currently stands. And with that new sense of liberal identity, at least part of the state of Virginia, in terms of its presidential election history, the last time it went to a Republican was 2004, right? So Virginia has this centrist Democrat, more moderate Democrat type of feel to it, which means that Youngkin needs to pander. He needs to pander towards those independent voters. But to be caught on video, with his face visible, with his audio clear, saying this statement makes him seem disingenuous. And the Democrats have not been letting up. Even though the polling data indicates that Terry McAuliffe has a lead, they have not let up a single part of this campaign, no matter what Youngkin does. I mentioned this early on in the campaign that Youngkin needed the perfect storm in order to win in Virginia. In fact, he's getting the exact opposite. He's being closely tied to President Trump. He's running behind in terms of fundraising numbers. He is getting these hot mic tapes released. He's denying the first debate that's been going on for 35 years in terms of the tradition for the Virginia gubernatorial election candidates to do such a debate for the Virginia Bar Association. I mean, everything that Youngkin needed to do right or needed to not even happen is happening, or he's just doing wrong. And that's the unfortunate reality for Glenn Youngkin. This race is moving further and further away. But for the issue of abortion in specific, this has been targeted by the media for quite some time. Even now, especially after that released tape, they are still asking him questions. On July 14th, 2021, the media in Virginia went to an event. Various media sources went to an event in which Glenn Youngkin was campaigning with Nikki Haley, and then other events in which Glenn Youngkin was there. This was an event in McLean, Virginia, so Northern Virginia region, so they caught up with him. They asked him, "Will you speak with us for the issue of abortion?" But when he was leaving the event, he declined to join that conversation, but did tell reporters, as they say, he wanted to make time to answer this. So Youngkin not only has the addition of President Trump being tied closely to his campaign, which we know now after those 2020 election results is not a winning strategy in Virginia. It is also about abortion, traditional issues that really rile up the suburban base, really make angry these Democratic voters that previously might have been Republican voters, in all honesty, in the state of Virginia, but are now Democratic voters. They are enraged in many cases by the issue of abortion. The American public in its entirety supports a woman's right to choose. The state of Virginia does so as well, more so than the national numbers. And the reason for that is because the country itself, on the issue of abortion, has let the courts decide for over a few decades now and continues to be okay with the decision that was made in Roe v. Wade. So for abortion to be legalized and then Youngkin to be caught on tape, seemingly viewed as a position where he was in secrecy, where this was not being taped. This was not an answer made towards the media. This is exactly what Project Veritas and other groups try to do in terms of exposing candidates for their otherwise more controversial views that they wouldn't share on the campaign trail. So this was the honest Glenn Youngkin, at least what is being perceived by the Virginia voters. I see this as Youngkin trying to win over that one person he's speaking to and trying to be honest about what they will do. But the one word that really strikes me as surprising that he would even say this is the fact that he said, we can start going on offense. Rather than say, I'm a pro-life candidate, but I will respect the court's decision, and if it was to be overturned, I would not actively seek abortion rights for women in Virginia. It would be another thing, again, to sort of say, I don't support this, but who am I to interject my opinion over the court system? Or to say anything else, really. But the fact that Glenn Youngkin wants to go on offense in a state as liberal as Virginia, quite honestly, double the margin for Biden in Virginia than it was on the presidential level. In fact, more than that, means that the state itself is not only left-leaning, but left-favored in almost every regard. When you take a look at the recent election results, 2013, 2017, and now 2021, you will start to see Democrats do well. Even in between. In 2015, Democrats were able to pick up one seat in the Virginia House of Delegates. They lost the Virginia Senate election. They lost that election, but in 2019, reclaimed the majority in the Virginia Senate, 21-19. In 2019, they reclaimed the majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. And in 2017, following Terry McAuliffe's term as governor, who is, yes, the same one on the ballot again in 2021, in Virginia, you can't run for consecutive terms. In 2017, Ralph Northam, the lieutenant governor at the time, I believe, or maybe the attorney general, we can go ahead and check, who's the lieutenant governor of Virginia, defeated Ed Gillespie in this state by 9 points statewide. So all around in 2013, the Democrats won that governor election. 2015. They may have lost the state Senate, but picked up a seat in the House of Delegates. 2016. Clinton wins Virginia despite losing a number of other swing states: Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Florida, Georgia. Continuing on. In 2017, Northam wins by 9 points. 2019, Democrats flip both chambers. And then now 2021, the numbers don't look much better for Glenn Youngkin. And this issue of abortion, which may not seem to be super important, as if this is some deal breaker for many voters for Glenn Youngkin, which in all honesty, it probably isn't. If they were supporting Glenn Youngkin before, they probably support his issue and stances on abortion. But for this to add on, to be an additional pile up, sort of tells us why, number one, Youngkin doesn't want to go ahead and participate in that first debate, and number two, why this race is turning more and more in the favor of the Democratic Party. Again, I have not released my final prediction about the Virginia governor's race. I think I mentioned this a few videos back because I haven't gotten enough information to give you a margin-wide understanding or a margin-wide prediction per se, and then moving on to the elections down the ballot. But what's happening in Virginia so far with Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin is that this race is certainly shaping up to be a Trump versus centrist Democrat race that Glenn Youngkin so much wanted to avoid. Every time he distanced himself from President Trump latched himself back on. Or every time Glenn Youngkin wanted to be perceived as a moderate/independent Republican, something like this, jumped right back up. The issue for Glenn Youngkin is that, in a sense, he's being honest, but a little too honest. Saying he was really honest, saying that once there was a majority, referring to the Republicans, and when he was governor, that he will go on offense on the women's right to choose. That is what is negative about this. In addition to the fact that when you go on Glenn Youngkin's website, you try to look at some of these, meet Glenn, latest news, events, everything about his campaign website, you can't find the word abortion on here. You can't find where he stands about this individual issue. And I think for the same reason why he's trying to hide it, saying that he needs to win those independent votes. But now that he's laid out his cards, he's been very honest, but a little too honest. The way to win elections in our American political system, as it so seems from someone who views it on the outside, as many of you guys do as well, you'll notice that a lot of the times politicians pander, they lie, they deceive voters, and that's part of the political system. Not to say it's right. I do think that there is a lot more that needs to be done in terms of political open, and I guess the way that we view the voters and view the candidates and where they stand on certain issues. The transparency, that's the word I was looking for, is certainly something I believe needs to be out there. But if Youngkin was to run a strong campaign, he said it himself, he can't win independent voters by taking such a harsh stand on abortion. But the fact this is now released and highlighted further that he's intentionally trying to deceive the voters, well, you see, you can always deny something, you can have plausible deniability, but now that it's on video, this will be used and ran in attack ads potentially throughout the rest of the year. And I see no reason why the Democrats wouldn't want to do it. They have been attacking Youngkin on every single thing they can get. And I've been trying to find the word abortion on this website. In fact, there's a little chat box here, which before this video gets started, I went into. They're supposed to have a live chat representative, and I, gave them a fake name. I gave them a fake email just because I didn't want to subscribe to the mailing list or whatever. But I told them, asked the question. It said, "Are you a supporter of Glenn Youngkin?" I said no, just to see if they would use that as a way to try to convince me over. And then I asked the question, what are Glenn Youngkin's opinions on abortion? And then just a few moments later, I got a message saying there are no live admins or no live agents, which I can understand, but it's also, a Sunday and the final stretch of the campaign. There were no live agents, so they couldn't answer the question essentially. And I don't think it was intentional because I asked the question of abortion, but the point being that the bot itself didn't recognize that I was asking a question such as abortion, which usually they would have a canned response for, at least in other campaign websites that I've seen a similar feature used. And number two, that there wasn't anyone there to answer a question such as that. And I find it to be unfortunate that sometimes you can't see these types of questions, but it seems Youngkin is really trying to push away from this narrative that he's some major pro-life fanatic, but he is. And that's exactly what you would expect from someone in the post-Trump era Republican Party, but that's exactly what Youngkin doesn't want you to think about him. But the voters and reporters are getting upset. They want to know where he stands. They've gone to his events, followed him, trailed Nikki Haley. They've done everything they could to try to get this question out of Glenn Youngkin, and I can tell you now, it will come up at the Virginia debate. Whenever Youngkin and McAuliffe debate, we will see the first ever response, or potentially before them. As Youngkin says, he really wants to meet with the press, so do it. So go out and meet with them. Because right now, looking at it from an analytical point of view, as we've been doing for months now, it has only gotten worse for Glenn Youngkin. But the polls don't exactly reflect this race as expanding as a much larger victory for Terry McAuliffe. But I do want to warn you and preface this by saying that the only polls we've had so far are Republican internals. So what does that mean? Essentially, these are conservative pollsters that have been public in their views before or intentionally used by Republican campaigns to poll primaries, to poll inside their own party, and to do general election polls, but have that inherent Republican bias. And typically speaking, Republican internals skew towards the right, pretty heavily, sometimes. But every single one of them, as we've seen so far, has shown Terry McAuliffe ahead. As little as 2 points and as much as 5 points. But the main takeaway is McAuliffe leads, even when the opposition does their own polls. So Youngkin is still in hot water. There isn't much letting up, and it seems that this campaign is getting more scandalous and more treacherous for both sides as the time continues on. We will see what happens by the end of the campaign season. I am personally excited to see what this debate will uncover, whether or not more stances or more non-answers will be given from both sides. But right now it seems that Glenn Youngkin is in a very unfortunate position, being in hot water with Trump, being in hot water with this new video, being hot water the fact that he's under fundraising. His Democratic opponent, Terry McAuliffe, he's facing everything that he shouldn't have faced if he was to win this race. But at the end of the day, American politics can be treacherous, and Virginia politics can be equally as treacherous. So for him to be in this position, I can't say I'm thoroughly shocked, but I can say this is not the way that Glenn Youngkin really wanted this to go down. And it's not an early sign at all, or any type of early indicator that Youngkin is going to win this race. And he needs to face that and answer these questions from the journalists. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions down below. On the left, there's my Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. If you caught that, I got tripped up there for a second. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.